Welcome to Pod Save English, the podcast that helps you navigate your professional journey. I'm Melody, and I'm here with my co-host Avery. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most challenging aspects of job interviews, behavioral and situational questions.
Thanks, Melody. These questions can make or break an interview, and yet so many candidates stumble through them unprepared. Today, we're going to give you the tools and strategies to not just answer these questions, but to absolutely nail them.
Let's start with the basics. There are two main types of interview questions we're talking about today. First, behavioral questions. These start with phrases like, tell me about a time when, or describe a situation where. These questions ask you to share specific examples from your past experience.
Exactly. And then we have situational questions, which sound more like, what would you do if, or how would you handle? These are hypothetical scenarios that test your problem-solving approach and judgment. The key difference is that behavioral questions look backward at what you've actually done, while situational questions look forward at what you might do.
And here's why interviewers love these questions. They're based on the principle that past behavior is the best predictor of future performance. When you tell a story about how you handled a difficult customer in your previous job, the interviewer is really asking, how will you handle difficult customers here?
This is where the STAR method becomes your best friend. STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. For every behavioral question, you want to set the scene with the situation. Explain what your task or responsibility was, describe the specific actions you took, and finish with the result you achieved. This structure keeps your answers focused and compelling.
Now, let me give you a more detailed example of the STAR method in action, because the structure really matters. Let's say you're asked, tell me about a time you had to learn something quickly. Here's how you'd structure it. Situation: 6 months into my marketing role, our analytics specialist left unexpectedly right before a major campaign review. Task: I needed to master our analytics platform in 2 weeks to present performance data to senior leadership.
Action: I created a learning plan dedicating 2 hours each morning to online tutorials. I reached out to colleagues in other departments who use similar tools, and they practiced by analyzing data from our previous campaigns. I also prepared backup slides in case I needed help during the presentation. Result: I successfully presented comprehensive analytics that helped secure a 40% budget increase for the next quarter. My manager was so impressed that they asked me to train the new analytics hire when they started.
Let's dive into some specific scenarios you're likely to encounter. One of the most common is about conflict resolution. The question might be, describe a time you had a conflict with a coworker or manager and how you resolved it. This question is testing your interpersonal skills, emotional intelligence, and ability to handle workplace tensions professionally.
When answering conflict questions, focus on your role in resolving the situation, not on blaming the other person. For example, in my previous role as a project coordinator, I had a disagreement with a team member about project priorities. Instead of letting it escalate, I requested a private meeting where I actively listened to their concerns and shared mine. We discovered we both wanted the project to succeed, but had different approaches. We compromised by incorporating elements of both strategies, which actually improved our final outcome.
Perfect example. Notice how that answer shows maturity, problem-solving skills, and the ability to find win-win solutions. Now let's talk about teamwork questions. Something like, talk about a successful team project and your role in it. Interviewers want to see that you can collaborate effectively and contribute meaningfully to group efforts.
For teamwork questions, be specific about your contribution while also highlighting how you supported others. Don't just say, we did this. Explain what you did. For instance, our marketing team was tasked with launching a new product in 6 weeks. I took the lead on market research and competitor analysis, but I also noticed our graphic designer was overwhelmed. I offered to help with initial concept sketches, which freed her up to focus on the final designs. The campaign exceeded our engagement targets by 30%.
That's a great example of showing both individual contribution and team support. Now, leadership questions can be tricky, especially if you haven't held a formal management role. Give an example of a time you led a project or initiative. Remember, leadership isn't just about having a title. It's about taking initiative and guiding others toward a goal.
Absolutely. You could talk about leading a training session, organizing a volunteer event, or even spearheading a process improvement. The key is to show how you motivated others, made decisions, and achieved results. For example, I noticed our team was struggling with outdated software that was slowing us down. I researched alternatives, presented a business case to management, and then led the implementation. I created training materials and helped each team member adapt to the new system. Our productivity increased by 25% within the first month.
Now, let's tackle one that makes many people nervous: failure questions. Describe a time you failed and what you learned from the experience. This isn't about finding the perfect candidate who never makes mistakes. It's about finding someone who learns and grows from setbacks.
The key here is to choose a real failure. Take ownership without making excuses and focus heavily on what you learned and how you improved. Don't pick something that would be disqualifying for the role you're applying for. For instance, early in my career, I missed a critical project deadline because I underestimated the time needed for client revisions. I had to inform my manager and work overtime to complete it. I created buffer time into all my project timelines and to communicate more frequently with clients about revision expectations. Since then, I've never missed a deadline.
Perfect. That shows accountability and growth. On the flip side, success questions like share our professional accomplishment you're proud of let you shine. This is your moment to showcase your best work, but make sure it's relevant to the role you're seeking.
Choose an accomplishment that demonstrates skills the new role requires. Quantify your results whenever possible. For example, I am proud of developing a customer onboarding program that reduced churn by 40% in the first quarter. I identified pain points in our existing process through customer surveys, redesigned the workflow, and created step-by-step guides and video tutorials. The program was so successful that other departments adopted similar approaches.
Excellent. Now let's discuss pressure and stress questions. How do you handle a tight deadline or a stressful situation? Employers want to know you won't crumble under pressure. Your answer should demonstrate both your coping strategies and your ability to maintain quality work even when things get intense.
Show your process for staying organized and focused under pressure. For instance, when facing tight deadlines, I immediately prioritize tasks by impact and urgency. I break large projects into smaller chunks and set mini deadlines. During a product launch where we lost 2 weeks due to vendor delays, I reorganized our timeline, identified tasks that could be done in parallel, and coordinated daily check-ins with all stakeholders. We launched on time and actually improved several features in the process.
Adaptability questions are increasingly common in today's rapidly changing workplace. Describe a time you had to adapt to a major change at work. This tests your flexibility and resilience. Companies want employees who can roll with the punches and even thrive during transitions.
Focus on how you embraced the change and found opportunities within it. For example, when our company merged with a larger corporation, our entire workflow system changed overnight. Instead of resisting, I volunteered to be part of the transition team. I learned the new system quickly, created comparison guides for my colleagues, and identified ways the new system could actually improve our efficiency. I became a resource for the team and helped reduce the learning curve for everyone.
Problem-solving questions like walk through a complex problem you faced and how you solved it are all about demonstrating your analytical thinking and methodical approach. Interviewers want to see how you break down complex issues and develop solutions.
Walk them through your thought process step by step. For instance, our customer satisfaction scores dropped significantly, but we couldn't identify why. I started by analyzing the data by time period, department, and customer segment. I discovered the issue was concentrated in one product line and coincided with a recent update. I interviewed affected customers, worked with the development team to identify the specific features causing problems, and coordinated a fix. Satisfaction scores returned to normal within 3 weeks, and we implemented better testing protocols to prevent similar issues.
Before we continue, let's address some of the most common mistakes people make with behavioral questions, because avoiding these pitfalls can really set you apart. First mistake, being too vague or generic. Instead of saying, I'm a team player, give specific examples of how you contributed to team success. Second, talking too much about what we did without highlighting your individual contributions. Remember, they're interviewing you, not your entire team.
Third major mistake, choosing examples that paint you in a negative light. If you're asked about conflict resolution, don't choose a story where you were clearly in the wrong or handled things poorly. Fourth, rambling without structure. Without the STAR framework, answers become confusing stories that lose the interviewer's attention. And finally, not preparing examples in advance. You cannot wing behavioral questions and expect to perform well.
Finally, initiative questions. Tell me about a time you went above and beyond your job description. These questions identify self-starters who don't wait to be told what to do. They're looking for employees who will contribute beyond the bare minimum.
Share examples where you saw an opportunity and took action without being asked. For example, I noticed our company's social media presence was inconsistent across platforms. Even though it wasn't part of my marketing coordinator role, I researched best practices, created a content calendar template, and presented a strategy to my manager. They approved it, and I implemented the new approach. Our social media engagement increased by 60%, and managing social media became part of my official responsibilities with a salary increase.
Now, let's talk about how these questions vary across different industries, because context matters. In tech roles, you might face questions about debugging under pressure or handling conflicting stakeholder requirements. In healthcare, expect scenarios about patient safety or ethical dilemmas. In finance, questions often focus on risk management and regulatory compliance. Sales roles will emphasize relationship building and meeting targets under pressure.
Let's dive deeper into situational questions, since they require a different approach than behavioral ones. A situational question might be, if you discovered a colleague with falsifying expense reports, what would you do? Or how would you prioritize your tasks if you had 3 urgent deadlines on the same day? These questions test your judgment, ethics, and problem-solving approach for situations you may not have experienced yet.
Here's something crucial that many candidates don't prepare for: follow-up questions. After you finish your STAR story, the interviewer might dig deeper with questions like, what would you do differently next time? Or how did other team members react to your approach? Or what was the biggest challenge in that situation? Don't panic. These follow-ups are actually good signs that they're engaged with your story.
And what happens when you're asked about a situation you've never encountered? Let's say they ask about managing a team, but you've never been a formal manager. Don't say, I've never done that. Instead, try, while I haven't managed a team formally, I have experience leading project groups and training new employees. For example, then adapt the relevant experience using the same STAR structure, focusing on the transferable skills.
Let's talk about the often overlooked aspect of delivery and body language when telling your stories. Your nonverbal communication is just as important as your words. Maintain good eye contact, use natural hand gestures to emphasize points, and vary your tone to keep the story engaging. Lean forward slightly when you reach the action part of your story. It shows enthusiasm and draws the interviewer in.
Pace is crucial too. Don't rush through your story, but don't drag it out either. If you notice the interviewer's attention waning, wrap up your current point and move to the result. And here's a pro tip. Practice your stories in front of a mirror or record yourself. You'll notice nervous habits you didn't know you had, like saying too much or avoiding eye contact during difficult parts of the story.
Before we wrap up, let's talk about preparation strategies. You should have 5 to 7 strong STAR stories ready that can be adapted to different questions. Practice telling these stories out loud until they feel natural. Write them down, but don't memorize them word for word. You want to sound conversational, not rehearsed. Let me give you some advanced preparation strategies that most candidates skip. First, create a story bank by categorizing your experiences. Have examples ready for leadership, teamwork, conflict resolution, innovation, failure, and customer service. Each story should be adaptable to multiple question types. Second, research the company's values and recent challenges. Then ensure your stories align with what they need.
Third strategy, practice the pivot technique. If you're asked about something you don't have a perfect example for, smoothly transition to a related experience. I haven't faced that exact situation, but I have dealt with a similar challenge. Fourth, prepare for the most likely questions based on your resume gaps or career changes. If you switched industries, expect questions about adaptability. If you have employment gaps, have your explanation ready. And remember, interviewers are looking for evidence of the skills and qualities listed in the job description. Read that job posting carefully and think about which of your experiences best demonstrate those specific requirements. Tailor your stories to align with what they need.
Also, keep your stories concise but complete. Aim for about 2 minutes per story, enough detail to be compelling but not so long that the interviewer loses interest. Practice with a timer if you need to.
One final tip. Always end with the result and make it specific and quantifiable when possible. Numbers and percentages make your accomplishment more credible and memorable. Instead of saying, "It went well," say, "We increased efficiency by 30% or reduced customer complaints by half."
Now here's your actionable game plan for mastering behavioral and situational questions. First, this week, write down 10 significant experiences from your career, both positive and challenging. Use the STAR method to structure each one. Second, practice these stories out loud until they feel natural, not memorized, but comfortable. Third, research common questions for your specific industry and role level.
Fourth, do mock interviews with friends or family, focusing specifically on behavioral questions. Fifth, review the job description and identify which of your stories best demonstrate the required skills. Sixth, prepare thoughtful questions to ask the interviewer. It shows engagement and lets you gather information to tailor future responses if you have multiple interview rounds.
Remember, behavioral and situational questions are your opportunity to differentiate yourself from other candidates who might have similar qualifications on paper. Your stories reveal your character, problem-solving style, and how you'll fit into their team culture. Don't just tell what happened, help them envision you succeeding in their environment. With proper preparation and practice, these questions become your strongest asset in landing the job you want.
Thanks for joining us on Pod Save English. If this episode helped you, share it with someone else who's job searching. Until next time, keep navigating toward your career goals.